What's up, everyone? Back for post-game Locked On Bucks. Frank is having his post-game snack and drink here, as you can see. But the Bucks lost to the Charlotte Hornets, and I've got a few questions to ask. Should the Bucks be worried about the Hornets? Should we be worried about the Bucks? And why can't the Bucks beat the Hornets? I don't know what's going on, but they've lost multiple games to the Hornets now over the last couple of seasons. So we're going to get into all of that and more right now.
You are Locked On Bucks, your daily Milwaukee Bucks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Bucks. I'm your host, Kane Pittman. You can see and hear me on this show daily and also find my work at ESPN. Joining me is the hungry man, Frank Madden, the founder of brewhoop.com and longtime voice of the podcast. And by the way, Frank, you were eating something crunchy, which is typically your tradition as we start the podcast. I just ate some delicious pineapple. Do you like pineapple? I feel like it's a divisive food. You do? Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Pineapple's good.
All right.
Good. I will say this. I don't have the patience to cut my own pineapple or anything like that. But, getting like the little clear container from the grocery store of the kind of pre-cut pineapple, I'm all about that. Also, my when I was home for Christmas, my mom would just she would actually cut pineapple, and I've liked pineapple like my whole life, and so it would be like something she would do. It's like, oh, Frank likes pineapple. Cut him some pineapple for breakfast. So shout out to my mom for having the pineapple hookup. I'm all about pineapple.
Good. Everyone out there.
Oh, and I am a pepperoni and pineapple pizza person. I like that. Haven't had it in a long time, but that's probably a more fun debate than talking about this Bucks game tonight. But yeah, I'm totally fine with pineapple and pizza too.
Yeah,
so bring the hate. Bring the hate.
No, I'm all for pineapple and absolutely everything. Everyone should be eating as much pineapple as possible. It's good for you. It's juicy. It's delicious. Built Bar, you're going to bring out that pineapple Built Bar. And just for those listening now that might be wondering, there's so many podcasts on the Locked On Podcast Network. You are listening to Locked On Bucks, not Locked On Pineapple. We'll get into it now, but we thank you for making Locked On Bucks your first listen of every single day. Frank, let's just ask a very simple question to start this. The Bucks lose 103-99. This was a frustrating game. It ended in frustrating circumstances with the Bucks unable to execute offense down the stretch. But just quite simply, I think now this is 4 times out of 6. The last 2 regular seasons, the Bucks have lost to the Hornets. I think that's the number right there. The Hornets are going to be thereabouts. It's interesting when you look at the standings. They are a potential first-round matchup. There's no doubt about that, particularly if the Bucks find themselves in the 3. We'll wait and see how that shakes out. Should the Bucks be worried about the Hornets, Frank?
I mean, I guess I'll go use a Mike Budenholzer line, and I think the Bucks need to just be worried about themselves, and just kind of be focusing on what they need to be doing. I mean, we saw it last year was kind of the best example. They could have tried to play for a theoretically better matchup in the first round. Some fans even criticized them for basically seeking out this matchup against the Miami Heat last year, and obviously the rest is history, right? So I think. I'll take since Bud is out with COVID now, and we haven't had the benefit of his extremely loquacious pre and post game interviews. I'm just picturing Eric, our friend Eric Name, shaking his head at at that comment. But I think really at this point, with this season and how weird it's been, and how whether it's the Bucks being injured and not being full strength, which was obviously and again, tonight was a major issue. They got Pat Connaughton, Dante DiVincenzo back. They probably would have been better off if they hadn't, because those guys went 0 for 14. More importantly, they were out Drew Holiday. The Hornets lost Kelly Oubre, but net same result as the other day. Bucks just got non-existent production from their guards, with Drew and George Hill both out, and the guys coming back, just obviously lacking rhythm and not able to contribute anything. And similar story on Saturday. So I think for the most part, you see this stretch of games coming up. I think the Bucks need to kind of buckle down and get their house in order. I mean, first get healthy, right? I mean, the couple days off here is a very welcome sight ahead of this kind of big matchup on Thursday with the Warriors. Just got Klay Thompson back. Draymond Green's been ruled out of Tuesday's game. So obviously I think that'll be a big swing. Question is whether Draymond plays on Thursday. But I mean, they need to start winning games. I think they're fourth now in the East. Yeah, they're fourth in the East. I mean, they have more losses than the Sixers, who are fifth. And they have the same number of losses as the Raptors, who are seventh, but the Raptors have 6 fewer wins because of just how many more games the Bucks have played. So, again, I think the top 8 in the East is pretty legit. Basically, that goes from Bulls, Brooklyn, Heat, Bucks, Sixers, Cavs, Raptors, and Hornets. I'm not going to look at the teams, especially like the 6 through 8 teams, Cavs, Raptors, Hornets. I just think the Bucks are probably, there's too talented from a first round perspective. But the problem is right now the Bucks will be playing the Sixers, not one of those other teams in the first round of the playoffs. So I think, again, they have to focus on themselves. Obviously job one is getting healthy, but then they have to start really taking care of business. And that business is getting harder with the schedule because, they let some winnable games slip away. I think tonight, I would have said tonight would have felt like stealing a game if you win that game. I think the Hornets probably should have won that game. They were leading pretty much the entire way after, call it, the first quarter. But yeah, I mean, I worry less about kind of really individual teams. But again, you have to give the Hornets credit because, as you said, I mean, they've given the Bucks some problems. They've got a lot of, they start basically 4 guys who can dribble, pass, shoot. Plumlee's really the only guy that doesn't do that, and they obviously can go small and just really spread you out. That's why they have one of the league's best offenses. And ironically, that was not the problem tonight. I thought the Hornets got a lot of good looks they missed, but ultimately, Bucks, again, without any point guards, we saw Khris, Giannis, and in late case, Jordan Nwora throwing a really bad pass. Khris and Giannis had 13 turnovers between them. I mean, just way too sloppy. And it kind of figured that this game would be decided in the last couple minutes by the Bucks just not even being able to get shots off because they couldn't execute.
Yeah, I mentioned this after the first game when I podcasted with Justin yesterday, and just even looking at some of the matchups. Like I know you get Pat back and I know you get Dante back, and I didn't think that either of those guys would play in this game. Just I wasn't sure that they would fly him out for this one game. I thought perhaps they'd give him an extra couple of days there. But they probably thought that they needed some extra shooting or some extra manpower in the rotation. So on the surface, I understand the decision, as you pointed to. Didn't quite pan out for those two guys. Particularly Dante was rough. He's just struggling to get the ball in the bucket right now. Really, really struggling so far. Although it's been so interrupted. People are mad. I'm seeing on Twitter, people are mad. And people were very quick to point out the last time we discussed Dante that they think I go too easy on him. I'm just a Dante fanboy. I just need to see weeks of consistent basketball of Dante if we can see that before I completely tee off on him. That's just the way that I'm looking at it. But you mentioned the first game, and you had Giannis, Khris, and Bobby that had 89 of the 106 points. Tonight, you get 71 of 99 from Giannis, Khris, and Jordan Nwora. But unfortunately, as you pointed to, the turnovers were a problem. And when you're asking those two guys to be basically your ball handler on every possession up the court, unfortunately, those guys had 19 assists combined, but 13 of the 20 turnovers, as you pointed to, came from those two guys. And it was just sloppy. It was just sloppy down the stretch. Some of it, I don't know whether it was fatigue, whether it was just laziness. I'm not sure what it was, but some of the turnovers were pretty tough to watch.
Yeah, I mean, the kind of, let's call it the decisive turnover, Giannis throwing one too high and hard for Pat Connaughton, and he's not able to save over to Wesley Matthews. So someone comments to me like, well, why are you running a play for Pat Connaughton? I mean, Khris Middleton was inbounding. You always have the option to get it back to the inbounder, but you had the ball in Giannis's hands driving middle of the floor down 2 points. I mean, the whole point is to get the ball into your best player's hands, give him the option to drive, attack. That's what Giannis does best. He had more than enough time to do that. And then give him outlet options if the defense collapses so that you've got a look for an open three. Just didn't work out, right? It's not like they said like, all right, Giannis and Khris, you guys are both decoys. Get out of the way so Pat Connaughton can shoot a three. It's just the way it worked out. And again, that was kind of fitting, but just some of the, I mean, at least that again was a little of a bang bang play. I mean, Jordan Nwora, a couple times they had him bring the ball up just so Khris wasn't getting pressured every time up the floor. I mean, absolutely, that's what the Hornets were smart to do. because Khris is not a great ball handler. I mean, he's a small forward. He's a very good passer. He can run pick and roll, but to ask him to be bringing the ball up all the time, it's not easy, right? I mean, it takes something out of you. And again, his handle isn't great, and especially when he's forced to take on the de facto point guard role, he can really get sloppy. And again, some of the turnovers too. It wasn't just that the Bucks had a lot of turnovers; it was the nature of the turnovers. I mean, just easy buckets, but felt like especially in the first half, the Hornets just got some just runouts, and when you're coughing the ball up at your own hash, basically at the logo or right around that point, the coach's box. I mean, bad things are going to happen. End of the day, I mean, the Hornets outscored them 15-9 on fast break, so it wasn't outrageous, but I mean, that's an area the Bucks have typically won most nights, right? Is they win the paint and they win on the break. Tonight they lose both of those areas. The Hornets 44-40 in the paint, and ultimately teams were basically identical from three. 13-43 for the Bucks, 13-44 for the Hornets. Both teams pretty much even in terms of free throw shooting. Both teams had 16 free throw attempts. Hornets made 2 more. So again, I think this was just one of those games where it wasn't pretty. You're missing really key guys, especially in terms of your backcourt depth, and obviously the guys that you got back, Pat, Dante, didn't give you anything in terms of shooting. And pretty just remarkable to look at the Bucks bench the last 2 games. Let me just bring it up because I crunched the numbers real quick. But Saturday they were 2 for 15 with 5 points, and on Monday they were 3 for 23 for 10 points. I mean, that's 2 of the worst performances you're going to see from an NBA bench, and they happen in back-to-back games. You called up the numbers from Saturday. Your top end, top 3 did about everything they could, and you still lose. And tonight, similar story. Just not enough offense when literally everybody but your top 3 scorers. And give Jordan Nwora credit; he was part of the problem on Saturday offensively. He bounced back really nicely tonight, gave them, I thought, a really nice shot in the arm. Wes Matthews had a very nice night, including a big putback that tied it off of Giannis, missed and one opportunity. But unfortunately, those efforts get wasted because that was pretty much it. Bobby, really quiet night for him. And so it was really 4 guys and then a whole lot of nothing for the Bucks tonight.
It's been difficult recently to pick which bench player is going to be the one that's going to stand up, or which rotation player out of the stars who've been getting a really nice run here from Giannis the last few weeks, and Khris Middleton's been rounding into form, but the other guys have been up and down a little bit, which would make it very difficult if you're a betting man, Frank. But if you are, you should be going to betonline.ag. It's a new year, and BetOnline is wishing you a happy new betting year as well as they continue the march towards the playoffs and beyond in a number of sports. BetOnline is the number 1 spot for all the best sports wagering action in 2022. There's a new year and a new updated desktop and mobile website to sign up today. You can receive a 50% welcome bonus. If you do that, just use the promo code LOCKEDON to get started, whether it's football, basketball, hockey, boxing, UFC, Vegas casino games. They've got it all at BetOnline. It's the fastest and easiest way to wager on all your favorite sports. That's BetOnline, where the game starts. I've been telling everyone about the Locked On Now podcast. Make sure you check it out. You can get it wherever you get your podcasts. Listen to Locked On Bucks, then move on. Maybe Locked On Hornets are celebrating at the moment. Who knows? But you can hear it all on the Locked On Now podcast, so check that out. You mentioned Jordan Nwora. It's interesting looking at the box score because he was 7 for 10 from the field. He only had the 1 turnover, which was unfortunately the unfortunate turnover at the end there. But he was plus 20.
Yeah.
Plus 20. How does that happen? I mean, obviously, the Bucks had their moments in this game. The Hornets started the third quarter and really pushed away. And then in between, obviously, the Jordan Nwora minutes were pretty productive tonight. He played 28 minutes for his 18 points, 3 rebounds, picked up a couple of steals as well. And I've been having a lot of people, whether it's in the YouTube comments or whether it's on Twitter, people describing Jordan Nwora as one of the more difficult players to project what you're going to get night to night. And my first reaction to that is, well, yeah, I mean, this guy's in his second year. He was a second-year draft pick. His role has been fluctuating from night to night because sometimes he's asked to start and score. Sometimes he's only playing 10 minutes. So maybe he's struggling to find some consistency. But where are you at on Jordan Nwora right now based on what we've seen this season? Because I think it is hard to get a read on it.
Yeah, I mean, I did my Twitter sort of
I
roster
saw that, by the
summary
way.
today. Yeah, I was, you were saying the other day, I guess I tweeted out a GIF of an Always in Sunny Philadelphia, something about Always in Sunny Philadelphia, and you were like, "What is this show?" I keep,
Yeah.
seeing things about it, and so I discovered that you had never seen It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. So you have that homework assignment, and that kind of inspired me. I did it in the preseason. I did kind of like the roster roundup using Curb Your Enthusiasm GIFs, and so this time I did it with kind of a midway, halfway season thing with Always Sunny gifts. And with Jordan Nwora, I mean, the term I used to describe him was a roller coaster, right? I mean, it's been a really up and down season for him. Sometimes within a single game, right? And a lot of times when he, his counting stats, his raw scoring is up, it's oftentimes because he just takes a ton of shots. And give him some credit. In the last 2 weeks, we saw him have the 9 for 11 shooting game. And now we see him have a 7 for 10 shooting game when he had 18 points tonight, I think. Um, his catch and shoot numbers are way up this year. I think if we said like, okay, Jordan Nwora, what is your to-do list? What are the vitamins, right? That the Bucks coaching staff talks about, like, what do you need to work on? Catch and shoot was an obvious thing because last year he basically played most of his minutes in these random games where the Bucks were resting all their main guys. So he's starting and basically, said, "Hey, take 20 shots." Okay, well, that's not how you're going to become an every night player in the NBA. And so I think it's been encouraging. He's gotten a lot of starts tonight. He's been pretty good when he started, at least in terms of like he's been able to give you scoring, right? And again, it was a bit of an outlier that he had the night the other day where he literally was just like complete zero offensively. He scores. It's just not always like very offensive, not always very efficient. So I mean, I think overall, the catch and shoot stuff. We think offensively, the catch and shoot's been obviously a good development. Getting comfortable playing off of Giannis and Khris, and just being able to stand in a corner and be ready and be able to make kind of punish defenses and not need to pound the ball into the ground and dribble, drive, and step back and have to take those really difficult shots, which is one of the reasons why he's never that efficient, because he has to take a lot of hard shots. I think we saw him get to the rim a couple times tonight. That was sort of how he got started. He got kind of a little like one of those short floaters that he's pretty good at. So I think just again, he's got to get buckets, right? Like there's no Jordan Nwora NBA rotation player future if he's not getting buckets. And then I think some of the ancillary stuff. I mean, I think he's been better defensively. Again, are you putting him out there late in games expecting him to defend at a high level? Probably not, right? But we've seen him at least get enough situational awareness, like opening night, the block on Kevin Durant. He's always been a solid rebounder, and then he actually passes sometimes now, so that's encouraging. So I mean, I think he's made progress this year. I think the hard part is he's on a team that has championship ambitions. You've just added Wes Matthews, who, as we mentioned, was one of the other few bright spots tonight, who continues to play really well and obviously gives you more defensively than Jordan does. Doesn't have the dynamic offensive game that Jordan has, obviously. So it's just it's a hard spot for him, right? And I think the hardest thing for him is just get used to the fact that he's not going to have the same role every night. Sometimes he's going to be DNPing, and sometimes he's going to be starting, and he's got to be kind of ready for anything. And he's got to be able to be that microwave regardless of what kind of touches he's getting, who he's playing with, et cetera. And that's obviously a challenge. There's challenges like that for kind of a lot of the Bucks this year, just given the amount of guys that have been missing. But again, I think especially you look at the first 20, 25 games when he basically barely played after that first week of sort of encouraging play. I mean, I think things have turned in a better direction for him. But like we always say, seasons are super long. We're only halfway through. Unfortunately, we know there's going to be more injuries. And so I think, again, right now, what I say, he's going to be a rotation guy in the playoffs. Probably not if they're healthy, right? I think we know there's 10 guys before you get to Jordan Nwora, probably, in terms of the playoff rotation, if you include Dante, Pat, George Hill, Wes Matthews, and then again, if Brook Lopez is healthy, then Bobby Portis goes to the bench. So deck stacked against him, but again, I think he's at least seen enough. He's shown enough that you'd want to bring him back next year. And again, he probably isn't going to be super expensive to retain at this point if things continue on this way. But again, I think there's at least been progress, even if it's been kind of unsteady and not always very linear.
On the defensive side of the ball tonight, I was thinking about you, Frank, as I was watching this game, because I had a number of people getting angry about the zone that was relatively prominent tonight, and
Horace.
I knew you would be bothered by this zone. And look, they gave up some open looks, and people are asking, well, why are they sticking with it? Why are they doing this? I think we've kind of hinted to one of the reasons why already through this podcast. A lot of the times I'm sitting there and I'm saying, okay, well, Jordan Nwora, who we've just spoken about, is the guy that's the primary defender on Terry Rozier. It's like, okay, well, this is a very difficult assignment, and it just comes through the nature of not having the guards. But how did you view the approach, let's say that, of what they were trying to do out there? Because defensively, against the team that is willing to put out Rozier and willing to pull out LaMelo Ball and Gordon Hayward, who, by the way, I don't know how many people have watched Gordon Hayward over the last few years. We know that he's been injured a lot. But I think secretly, when we look at Boston and how one-dimensional they are offensively, the loss of Gordon Hayward has been massive, because you could see it tonight that LaMelo will pass the ball, but he does like to dribble a lot, and Terry Rozier will just like to fire up shots, where Gordon Hayward's the guy that can get it to the mid-range, he can penetrate and then kick the ball out. He just kind of connects everything offensively, and it's challenging when you have all three of those guys on the floor.
Yeah, I mean, I think as I mentioned earlier, I think the Hornets are a hard team to, hold down over long stretches with zone, because they can put 5 shooters on the floor. And, when you have a bunch of guys who can dribble, shoot, and pass, again, like, it just becomes hard, right? And as you said, I think, LaMelo is a great playmaker, but when I think of connectors, I think of more of guys who kind of make quick decisions and passes, and not so much those like guys that you want the ball in their hands so they can be kind of like that primary scorer. And so I think, the zone helps probably a little bit in terms of like you can kind of slant it to force them to get the ball out of LaMelo's hands, and, not let them run kind of like typical pick and roll type stuff, because of, when you're in a zone, you can basically kind of take some of that away. But man, it felt like the angles were just, it felt like, the harder it is for the defense, the zone, to find the guys to match up with. I always kind of, and again, I'm not a coach, but that's always sort of like how I sort of judge by how well it's doing. And it just felt like there were a lot of times where I was like, wait a minute, like, am I supposed to be there? Like, and guys were kind of jumping around a little bit. And look, the numbers defensively were very good tonight, like, again, against this team like Charlotte. I mean, yes, why they keep playing zone? Because Charlotte wasn't hitting enough shots to really hurt them. So, again, kind of the end justifies the means in some ways. But as far as like shot quality, again, I don't have shot quality numbers in front of me here. It felt like Charlotte had a lot of really good open looks. And again, the Bucks, at times were able to kind of gum things up a little bit with the zone and force some turnovers and, active hands and stuff like that. But it didn't feel like, Charlotte had a really hard time getting good looks. Now, again, though, those tended to be jump shots, right? And that's, I think, part of the calculus is, maybe you try to keep guys from getting to the rim. Like, were you able to prevent Miles Bridges from getting as many dunks because of the zone? Yeah, probably. But overall, obviously, you didn't have quite enough luck. But again, I attribute that more obviously to the offense, right? Just the turnovers, Giannis tie game, I think it was at 95, had PJ Washington 1v1 on the left side, settles for like a step back that he just airmails, way over the hoop for an air ball, right? Just plays like that. They just kind of wasted too many possessions through turnovers or bad shots. And, obviously they just kind of ran out of time at the end.
One thing that did piss me off tonight, Frank, was the foul call right on halftime, and I tweeted about it, and I don't tweet too often during games anymore.
Were you surprised they didn't? You're talking about Giannis's and one that was an offensive foul. Yeah,
exactly
that's
right.
the kind of play that I think you challenge, because it's such a. I mean, it's literally like, it's a foul on Giannis versus a 3-point play opportunity, and I always think back to. Do you remember a couple of years ago? I think this might have been the first year of the challenge.
When he nearly died against Indiana, was it?
I think it was Minnesota.
Okay,
and it was on the road in Minnesota, and yeah, he had that and one where he jumped up, and it looked like it was a rule to charge, I think, and then it got overturned into a 3-point play. Yeah, I mean, those are, I think, classic plays where again, I know coaches don't like to use the challenge early, but I think Giannis is kind of, for the Bucks, Giannis is the guy that, if you have a chance to A, keep him out of foul trouble, or B, flip a charge into an and one, I mean, that's about as big a point swing as you can get, right? Unfortunately, the Hornets didn't score with 2 seconds left or whatever after the foul call, but yeah, I had the same reaction. Now, again, would they have overturned it? I don't know. I mean, the way the defender bounced off him didn't look like he really pushed off on him, but I could have seen like maybe they wouldn't have overturned it. But yeah, I mean, and me, of course, as a selfish Giannis, stat junkie, of course, like I want them to roll the dice on those anyway, just because, we love me some Giannis stats.
I think, was it his second foul, by the way? I mean, this is like the other element to it. If it's his third foul or there's foul trouble involved, obviously that adds something to it.
If it was like his third or fourth foul, I'm guessing then that probably Darvin would have been much more likely to challenge it. But yeah, I mean, he wasn't really in foul trouble tonight as compared to the other night. So
right. Yeah. Because it's interesting, because when you say he didn't really push off, and we've seen this a lot, and it is more like a football play than a basketball play. Like, he is really just barging through these guys.
Yeah.
But it doesn't matter how you do it. It doesn't change the fact that the guy just runs in front of him and there's like side-on contact with Giannis. And then I see people say, and there was a few comments, well, he pushed off him. It doesn't really matter, because that's
kind of bounced off him. Yeah.
And it's after the contact anyway. So how can you call the foul after the initial contact? The initial contact is the defender just running in front of him. It's kind of like the more violent of it's the opposite side of the ball, but it's almost like a more violent intentional foul than the Chris Paul always just dribbles in front of a guy and just stops and they just trip over him. It's kind of like that. Like, Giannis is just moving and a guy runs in front of him, and then while they're in the road of the freight train, that's a defensive foul to me, no matter how violent it looks. If they want to step in front and take a charge, then they're braver than I am, and full credit to them, but they're not doing that. So I'm not sure how they're going to adjudicate that. But I think part of the reason why they call it offensive foul is because of just how aggressive and how far these guys go flying.
Yeah, it reminded me a lot of the play in Orlando when Gillespie bounced off of Giannis, and that was an and one. It was it was the same spot on the floor, and he just kind of like bounced off him and then went through and finished with a left-hand layup. Tonight it was the exact same play, basically. And I agree. I mean, it's not like, was that Plumlee that, or I forget who it was, squared him up on it. Maybe it was PJ Washington or whoever it was.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's kind of, it's not like they didn't like get in front of him. They were just sort of on the side and, again, just sort of bounced off him. And again, I think the only reason that it gets called is because it looks a little bit, because Giannis's arm is sort of like up against his body, and he's with his right arm and he's coming with his left on the outside, and he, it's sort of a shoulder barge type play, and it's only natural that his arm releases a little bit. Yeah. I'm demonstrating this for people watching on YouTube.
Very, very well, by the way. Very well.
But anyway, yeah, this is also just why, Giannis is really hard to officiate, right? Because he just physically can do stuff that you're just not used to seeing guys be able to do. It's tough.
All right, check out the Locked On Bets podcast with your boy Q and handicapping expert Lee Sterling after you're done with Locked On Bucks today. Plenty of podcasts I'm throwing your way to listen to, but check that one out if that's the type of thing you're into. Before we wrap it up, Frank, you've got a vintage piece of Bucks merchandise on that you showed me before we started recording. I've never seen a hoodie, a jersey, or I don't even know what you call it, but it's a Giannis, and it's red and green, which means that it's vintage merchandise you've got on there.
This I mean, it's not like my most I don't wear this out really, but yeah, I think it's from like I think it's from the 14-15 season. I call it a sweat jersey, because it is a hooded sweatshirt, and it is a jersey-ish, I call them the t-shirts called jerseys, so I'm going to call this a sweat jersey. I don't know if that's an official designation, but yeah, good to have some old school Giannis apparel. But I don't know. And let me say too, I mean, because I've seen a couple of people mention it. I've seen a couple of people mention like, oh, the last two games, like, this is why like they shouldn't have released DeMarcus Cousins. And I'm kind of two minds of it. I think one, the Hornets are not really a team that I would say like are a good matchup for Boogie. Now, granted, you could play a zone and try to have him kind of like hide inside, and his rebounding could help if they don't manage to find him basically as part of the zone. And again, given just the way that the Bucks bench struggled, of course, like the Bucks offense was so bad that I don't think Boogie could have hurt them offensively tonight. But by the same token, it's like, I think the bigger problem here was the fact that the Bucks haven't had any healthy guards, and tonight they added, if you call Pat a guard, obviously you had Dante, but you're still playing, Langston Galloway a bunch of minutes, and you're missing Drew Holiday, George Hill, and Grayson Allen, who have obviously been kind of the linchpins of that guard rotation, and especially with Drew and George, obviously the two-way steadiness has obviously been huge, and with Grayson the shot making, and clearly they're missing that shot making and scoring the last couple nights. So on the one hand, I'm like, well, okay, guys, like every time the Bucks lose, you can't just go to the well and say that like it's it's because of DeMarcus Cousins. I mean, again, I get it. I don't think it. I don't know that he would have necessarily hurt tonight. But again, defensively, maybe they get shredded a little bit more just because he's way less mobile than everybody else that they played, right? And it's a big opportunity for Mamu right now because he's kind of the de facto, third center-ish guy on the roster. And I think he's been fine this year, but and again, like I think he's at 38% from threes, I think, this year. And he's, a smart guy. He hustles, crashes the offensive glass, moves his feet pretty well on defense. But I think at the end of the day, like this is one of those interesting things. It's going to be, when I kind of watch him develop for next year or two. It's just the lack of strength, especially right now. It's one thing if he was out there with Brook Lopez or when he's out there with Giannis to protect him, but when he's having to go 1v1 against like a guy like Miles Bridges, who is really strong and physical, it's just tough for him, right? And he's just not physically capable of really standing up to that most of the time. So unfortunately it's been an ongoing education. The league taking away the game played limits on two ways. I'm curious how much, if at all, that impacted the Bucks' decision and willingness to let go of Boogie, because if Mamu had a 50-game limit right now, then you wouldn't be able to kind of finish the season with him playing every night. Obviously, at some point you'd run out of him being able to play. But yeah, all very interesting, right? Because clearly the Bucks are having to play small, and I think they got into a solid rhythm as kind of reclaiming some of their kind of size. They were rebounding the ball pretty well. Obviously, Boogie's defense left a lot to be desired. The rim production was atrocious with him on the floor. But now they have to once again learn to play a little bit differently. And again, I think from a playoff standpoint, getting more reps playing smaller probably is not a bad thing at all. I think the main concern is just, again, on some nights where, again, you're not going to play many bad teams anymore. So the days of Boogie beating up on the Magic or whatever, unfortunately, you're not going to have many of those games anymore. But you're definitely going to be, shining a light on the Bucks playing smaller and playing more mobile, because, you pretty much have no choice right now unless they make another move. And again, I don't see Brook Lopez walking through that door here next week or something like that.
Yeah, Mamu only played 10 minutes tonight anyway. I mean, they were minus 14 in those minutes, but yeah, he only played the 10 minutes. And again, he's been put in some situations that probably, of all things were considered and everyone was healthy, it wouldn't have been the case. Speaking of big men, though, that may or may not be walking through the door, as we wrap it up, I'll leave this one for our loyal listeners to think about. Jason Anderson from the Sacramento Bee tweeted earlier, I don't know if you saw this, Frank. He said, the New Orleans Pelicans, Minnesota Timberwolves, and Milwaukee Bucks have seats reserved for pro personnel scouts at tonight's Kings-Cavaliers game. That's more than usual. Maybe it's nothing, or maybe business is picking up with a month to go before the trade deadline. So I'll leave our listeners with that, with the thoughts of Marvin Bagley coming to the Milwaukee Bucks to save the day of the big man rotation. Frank, it's always a pleasure. We got 2 days off before the Bucks play the Warriors, so
it's the Bucks. Bucks are just cycling through former Kings big-ish men, right? Like Boogie's gone. Now, where's Costa Kufos right now?
I was going to say Giannis would be happy.
Yeah,
Giannis would be happy.
Get Giannis's boy Costa Kufos over here. And by the way, I listened to you and Justin last night. I mean, the cynicism towards the Giannis free throw routine, guys, come on, look, the rule book only says 10 seconds from when you get control of the ball.
Mm-hmm.
So I know Kane, you're over here, you and Justin are over here, like trying to get Giannis in trouble because he's doing his pantomime, whatever. I agree. Look,
thank you.
Like at some point the refs may say like, dude, like speed it up, but he did that all last postseason too, and they never, as far as I could tell, really bothered him about it. So
what about tonight? What about tonight when he thought that?
Well, when he wanted it, yeah,
he's like,
when he
wanted,
give me the ball. Yeah, that was the only time he'll ever try to get the ball quickly. So like he's not violating the rules. He's like, and when you say like, oh well, all he did was, cut the number of dribbles. Well, he used to take like 7 freaking dribbles. So I think the routine is absolutely. I mean, the change in routine has absolutely taken him from violating the rule every time to not violating the rule. Again, he's probably now at this point getting maybe close up to 10 seconds. But I mean, I think it's hugely encouraging that he's at least put himself in a position where he's not going to be in danger of, now again, I'm sure they're going to count and teams are, the fans are going to quick count or whatever. But I'm sure I think it's meaningful that he's made that change. As far as like his actual percentage change, I mean, look, he's shooting basically the same he did last year. I don't think obviously we want him to shoot well in the regular season, but Giannis's big problem is he's always been worse in the post. Like you go back throughout his career, he's always had problems shooting free throws in the postseason, which obviously speaks to there's some, as I've always been at something mental. It's always been my thesis. And hopefully the fact that he just, dropped a 50 piece and went 17-19 in a game 6, hopefully that helps him get over that. But for me, it's like, regular season is regular season, and it's almost like he's going to have to reprove it in the postseason for me. And yes, I realize he proved everything he needed to in pretty much every other respect last postseason. But anyway, yeah, let's hope Giannis can keep it, maybe low 70s. If he can kind of, I think he may have dropped back down to right under 70 tonight with the 5 of 8. But again, until he carries that over and hits 70% throughout the playoffs, I'll still have some concerns about Giannis in that regard. But again, we'll always have game 6 at least.
Oh, that's right. I mean, he's bought himself a lifetime worth of goodwill from the fans either way. So yeah, when we want more, we're all greedy, we're all selfish in that regard, but he's certainly got the job done when it most mattered. Like I said, 2 days off before the Bucks and the Warriors. That's going to be a really fun game. The one thing I will say about Milwaukee so far is they have generally been able to lift to the occasion. This is another national TV game, I believe. Well, it is in Australia anyway, although technically every game is national TV.
TNT, I think, yeah.
TNT, Thursday night. That's right. So we'll have a couple of days to look ahead to that. Like I said, Camille's going to be on the podcast one of those days. Always fun when she's on, so we'll get to that. But for now, for Frank and myself, what do you got?
One trivia question. All right, I'm looking at Giannis. I'm looking at Giannis' playoff series career.
Oh, no.
He has played, it looks like 12 playoff series in his career.
Yes.
Guess how many times he has shot 70% or better?
In 12 series. How many series has he shot? 3.
1, his very first. He shot 73.9% against the Bulls in 2015, and he's never been higher than 69.1% thereafter. He's been between...
Not so nice.
48% against the Nets last playoff series. He was, 64% against the Heat, 48% against the Nets, 53% against the Hawks, and 66% against the Suns, which tells you he went 17-19 and he still only shot 66% against the Suns. So,
all right, trivia for you.
Hey, every great player has to have some Achilles heel, right?
Yeah, I got trivia for you now before we wrap it up. Counter trivia.
All right, counter trivia.
What's the free throw percentage in Giannis' career of title clinching games?
Well, it's I guess 17. What is 17 out of 19?
I don't know.
It's what, 85%, something like that. Yeah, pretty decent.
Delightful. All right, let's wrap it up. For Frank and myself, we'll speak to you guys tomorrow.